Welcome everyone to a quick Linux security breaking news live stream. Stop the presses, fire up your remote, secure server connection, update your Linux kernel because StackRot CVE-2023-3269 Linux kernel privilege escalation vulnerability. The recurring security issues we like to point out here and shed some lights on. As disclosed, StackRot vulnerability is in compliance with Linux distro, yada yada, whatever. The flaw was found in handling stack expansion Linux kernel 6.1 through 6.4, aka StackRot. The result of what we recently highlighted as the only substitute for performance is more performance, and Linux kernel 6.1, right, the best invention since sliced bread. MapleTree and surrounding changes. MapleTree responsible for managing virtual memory areas. New algorithms recently introduced, years of work, can undergo node replacement without properly acquiring the memory management write lock, leading to use after free. Recurring theme, programming is difficult, and in the glorified portable assembler macro preprocessor that people call C, certainly more so. An unprivileged local user could use this flaw to compromise the kernel and escalate their privileges. StackRot is a Linux kernel vulnerability found in the memory management subsystem. It affects almost all kernel configurations and requires minimal capabilities to trigger. However, it should be noted that Maple nodes are freed using RCU callbacks, delaying the actual memory deallocation until also 2023 write garbage collection in your Linux kernel. Delaying the actual memory deallocation until after RCU for read copy update grace period. Consequently, exploiting the vulnerability is considered challenging. However, allegedly proof of concepts exist. To the best of their knowledge, there are currently no public available exploits targeting use after free by RCU bugs. However, my understanding is there is a proof of concept that will be released later in July, at the end of July. Background is complicated whenever mmap system call is used to utilize to establish memory mappings. The kernel generates a structure called VM area struct to represent the corresponding virtual memory area VMA. Also, for all new to this stuff, probably quite some stuff to learn already in terms of memory mapping and VMA and all the abbreviations here. This structure stores various information, including flags, properties, and other details related to the mapping, as annotated here. Subsequently, when the kernel encounters page faults and other memory-related system calls, it requires a fast lookup of a VMA solely based on the address previously. Before Linux kernel 6.1, the VMAs were managed using red-black trees. However, starting from Linux kernel version 6.1 as indicated and broadcasted on our channel for 1 or 2% performance improvements, the migration to Maple trees took place. Are RCU safe, read copy update safe B tree data structures of your Wikipedia of B trees, optimized for storing non-overlapping ranges. Nonetheless, their intricate nature adds complexity to the codebase, also complexity. Performance, the only constant is change, and performance improvements and complexity. Introducing the StackRot vulnerability, right? It is a classic case of performance. The only substitute for performance is more performance, and the only constant is change and regressions. This vulnerability is so bad that if you take a look here, I was already wondering that with 6.4.1 already noticed, as only big vendors are on this open source Linux kernel vendor security mailing list, and we with our number 106 Linux distribution, that is T2 we have not yet qualified for this vendor security list, and if I would have been on there, I would not be allowed to talk about this. Anyway, not to get thrown off of it again, but I already noticed that something is up when Linus, Sebastian Torvalds personally here, of Linux Foundation fame, was patching some stuff, right? Because I obviously, for our Linux distribution and customers, contract work and maintenance, of course, monitor the stuff. I regularly go through here of what's going up with dereferences, null pointers and reverts, right? And I noticed something seriously is up when some days ago Linus Torvalds personally did here some stuff on all architectures in reverse order of extensor, fix no mu build of log mm and find VMA. It's like, what the heck? And you know that something's up when Linus Torvalds personally works on stuff, because usually he just merges stuff, comments stuff and shouts at stuff. But when Linus Torvalds touches like Spark 32 of nobody touches this until it's being deleted, except David S. Miller, some other people and I, like fix log mm and find VMA conversion, it's like, yeah, seriously, what's going on, Linus? Something is up, right? Because they touched here all architectures and some generic code of always expands the stack with mmap write log held and stuff. And so this vulnerability is so tricky and devastating and generic that it took 2 weeks of all the kernel gurus to come to a consensus and Linus Torvalds himself to work and write this code. So yeah, there we have that. What we have to learn from that is high performance optimized algorithms are highly complex. And even if people at Oracle, IBM, Red Hat, SUSE and other universities work on groundbreaking performance improvements for a year or two, security researchers and other hobbyists still finds bugs in it, right? And I have two, like maybe three things to take away here, mostly hopefully productive criticism. The one is, of course, my recurring reminder, the only constant is change and regressions. And that is, of course, you change algorithms, super complex, high performance RCU algorithms and data structures that took years to develop with multiple people and review, and it's still regressions, right? And so yes, the only constant is change and regressions. You can order this shirt there in our YouTube merchandise below. That of course applies to everything from the Linux kernel to Firefox or glibc and the GCC LVM compiler in Mesa and everything in between. LibreOffice, GIMP, GTK, you name it. And other things are that, in my opinion, the Linux kernel does a really bad job at communicating CVEs. I pointed this out. I'm 25 years. I do Linux since 1996-ish. Kinda full-time since 1998. Like AKA a freaking long time of 25 years running Linux distribution. And even I'm extremely frustrated, right? Because in my opinion, this should be published better from the Linux kernel. Because why is here no information on the Linux kernel pages, right? Sure, I noticed immediately experts like people who work daily, professionally with Linux, run a Linux distribution, consulting, open source business, and so on. Even though, and that is also the thing, why are people like Pop OS and we not on Linux kernel security? Just because Pop OS and T2 are not rated in SUSE, why are we not on there? To know that 2 weeks in advance. But even if we are not on there, sure, not all the 2000 distributions can be on there, but given that T2 is one of the most sophisticated cross-compile things, because ironically, even Linus Torvalds in one of those commits here, maybe on this, like, yeah, even, and that is like, Linus, I need to drop you another email, because he writes here, working on Motor 68K, Microblaze, OpenRISC, Spark 64, touching all of this stuff, but hey, I didn't test that, right? The only substitute for testing is more testing, as Linus writes here. Note that this conversion was done manually and with the exception of alpha without any build testing because Linus has a fairly limited cross-build environment. Hey, Linus, there is T2 Linux since 20 freaking years with the history of Rock Linux. Like, why are you not using the free, one of the best, if not the best, outstanding cross-compile environments? It is as easy as, hey, if I can build 32 freaking build combinations on my home workstation on one Ryzen 7950X, I thought you have millions in your Linux Foundation, and what excuse is there of fairly limited cross-build environments? The case are all simple, and I went through, it's like, yeah, the only constant is changed. Like if a developer, if a senior developer tells you, hey, the cases are all simple, and I went through changes several times, but ... it's like, yeah. So only constant is change and regressions, certainly some more regressions. But I mean, if you run a professional, if it is hilarious that Linus Torvalds, with the Linux Foundation, they have 180 million in funding and they have a fairly limited cross-build environment. Hey, T2 is not expensive as Red Hat, like just go download it. And anyway, but my major point is, there is no excuse for not using T2 and publishing CVEs, right? Why is there not prominently, hey, CVE security warning like OpenBSD does? Why can OpenBSD and not BSD or so write CVEs on their primary project page? Like, why is here not a new section, latest security things? The Linux Foundation is funding farmers plumbing water with IBM and whatnot, and other water stuff maybe in Africa or wherever, and other kernels like embedded real-time OS kernels, that is ciphers or whatever. Nobody's using that. Unsuccessful tiny little, like, why are they funding other RTOS projects and other, like they're literally using, as I recently deciphered, why is the Linux Foundation using only 3% of their funding to give back to the Linux kernel development and 97% for other random nonsense? And like, why are they not paying someone to professionally curate all the security vulnerabilities? Because there are many, and there is really no excuse of not doing that, right? Of course, there are, like here, how many security vulnerabilities do we have? Like, recurring theme, last but not least, we should rethink how we do security, because we use kernels like the Linux kernel, the Windows kernel, the macOS kernel for Android and all the other. Like, security should have been better, right? And not like only get like mostly worse. And it should also not be that other independent people run this security vulnerability databases in their free time as a hobby, and the Linux Foundation has nearly 200 million of yearly funding, probably some more than 200 million. And there is no excuse that other people need to curate that here, right? And other people, like here's the Linux kernel CVEs, it's like, hey, donate there. The Linux Foundation sits with nearly 200 million in funding or so, and like, hey, donate here for us to curate that, because there are many, right? As you see here, 6.3.11 CVE 2023-3269, introduce new log and find VMA, page fault helper. And yes, there were others. Did you know that constantly, like, and that is the thing, right? Raise your hand, comment below. Do you know how many security vulnerability exploitable things are in the Linux kernel? Because hey, it's like kinda, if they are not communicating it, there surely are no security issues, right? Like previous video, IOU ring, so insecure, like so proven insecure, causing, what was it, 60% of all Google's security vulnerability project thing, that Google disables that in production, right? 637, right, multiple. Did you know 637 fixed CVE 2023-35788, 34.255, 2124 and 3212 of net schedule floor, fix possible out of bounds right in FL set whatever, XFS verify buffer content when we skip log replay. Also probably difficult to exploit. I guess you would need to have a manipulated like XFS file system on a USB drive or so, very XFS. So, I mean, not all of them are mission critical. I mean, they're certainly, like if you run a banking business or so, or internet services like Google, no buffer overrun and invalid buffer content to replay and stuff. But of course, truth be told, they are not as devastating when you can't exploit them locally or remotely, unless you, I mean, of course you can loop back mount that from a file, but that's certainly also not something a normal user on a Google server can do. But nonetheless, IP VLAN fix out of bound right caused by unclear SKB, CB, memstick, whatever that is. Is it memory stick, Sony memory stick? Who knows? Something, but NTFS. Yeah, certainly file system stuff, but X4, avoid potential slap of bounds. Like, yeah, they are not as critical. I'm not saying like all of them are, but here, IOU ring, right? R source check non-consecutive pages is like we probably discussed this previously. So yeah, the Linux kernel, I find it unfortunately disappointing, if not a disgrace or shameful. What we do, even our tiny little Linux distribution, what we do is I try to mark in our version history updates, like if we have an update, like of which many our data AI bot does nowadays, but if I do one manually, I usually mark this CVE, and if our tiny little hobby Linux distribution can do that, they're reasonable and stuff. Like, why can other not do it, right? Why can the big player that is Linux Foundation not do it? Given that Linux is used so vastly and in all of Android and internet services and appliances and increasingly in Windows, but who cares about Microsoft? Like, they need to do better. As much, yes, there was a talk of maybe Greg Kroll-Hartman or someone similar like that. They even made a talk, how's he written? CVE. There's like CVE is dead or whatever. Also, I vastly misspelled that. Linux, CVE. There was some talk of, yeah, CVEs are dead. Long live the CVEs. It's like, yeah, but you're not even, was it? Yeah, Greg KH, of course. But yeah, you make a talk of like, CVE sucks. Long live CVEs. Yeah, but it's like, where is your CVE database? Like basically, it could be here, it should be there. It's like I find this suboptimal. If not, I would actually go as far. What is the right English word for that? I find this not only suboptimal, but I find this gross negligence, to be honest, of. Let's open BSD. It's like, they surely have, I mean, they have so many security, they have so few security vulnerabilities, but yeah, there must be like open BSD CVE. Let's see, there must have been CVE details now. That is some other. Here is open BSD security. Yeah, something of that. Yeah, like that, like kernel/org security. Or something, full disclosure, because that's not really, I mean, that's probably cut it in 1991, but in my opinion, in 2001, this is already leaves, but we have 2023 now, right? Anyway, to summarize this, there are more CVEs in Linux kernel than you probably thought, not only in IOU ring, but also memory management. And in my last note, yes, I still dream about my microkernel that nobody writes for me, except QNX was quite good, but that is commercial. I would still argue this stuff, yes, performance, but at the end of the day, for increasing complexity and modern connectivity, I would say stuff like kernels and surrounding infrastructure should be way more simple. And yes, I understand it might have, it will have, like if you write a more simple and microkernel, it will have performance marginalities, but leave in the comments below, would you rather want a more secure system for your banking and business and internet services, or performance, but security vulnerabilities that are not properly disclosed? Anyway, that's it for this video. Yeah, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, RC1. Why is here RC1 in between? Why do they specifically list that? I'm not entirely sure. But that's it for this video. Let's take a very quick look in there. People comment, better to buy Linux from IBM. Why are you saying that? To get outdated stuff. Also, I usually, in our tiny little Linux distribution, we usually wait for .1. Because I know from my 25 years experience with all the massive changes that there always will be one more important fix, which is why I now since years always wait for the first .1 to have, like, to ship for our customers, like virtualization servers embedded and so on, automotive, carrier grade and everything in between, to have the last Linux kernel with, like in this case 6.3, like the last stable series with accumulated like 11, yes 12, but until yesterday 11 fixes, and such a much more reviewed by the community and with feedback improved, stabilized and stuff. And then when the month of development of the next big series like 6.4 comes out, of course it's less proven, right? Of course the only constant is change and regressions. Of course every .1, heck, even every .1, even every .2, even every .10 will have, like with millions, like tens of millions of lines of code with 10,000s of drivers, there always will be, hey, it's not written in Rust, right? Even in Rust there would be bugs in there. So yeah, and then with .1, like with precisely, there's even the changelog here, precisely with this CVE fixes from Linus Torvalds himself, then ship that with the most important regressions found and ruled out. And last but not least, that I just remembered, I recurrently remind people, right? I remember the time when maybe this rolling release Linux kernel development is not the best for stable and regression-free systems, because previously we had the stable series like 2.2, 2.4, 2.6, and the development series in between 2.3, 2.5. And I understand they have done this because it was too much work and too few people were testing the development series, right? So the argument was like the Linux kernel developers discontinued this development series for 2 or 3 years of development, like Windows and Microsoft would do with Windows and Apple would do with macOS, where like 1 year is developed and then it's like, hey, that is a new release with 1 year of improvements. And I understand their reasoning, like, hey, we changed so much and nobody's testing it, like let's just always throw it out to the people and accelerate our development cycle of continuous integration of changes and performance and regressions. But I have to wonder, with all this ongoing regressions and vulnerabilities, maybe it would actually be better to have a development series and accumulate improvements and have more API stable yearly, like 2.6, 5.0. But yeah, leave in the comments below. Just a thought. Somehow our power use of Linux feels recently increasingly broken. My impression is that this is not looking to be the the best what the computer society could do if we really wanted, but at least I would appreciate if they would properly disclose security here on this majorly sponsored site with millions of backing of the Linux Foundation. I mean, like more than nothing would be really appreciated. Anyway, what else do we have here? What happened in the years where Linux had hard failure? What happened in 10 years when nobody left to fix, taking all comment there. I don't think so, and welcome everyone, and thanks for watching. Of course there are 10,000. I mean, it will trigger many people and maybe even disappoint some, but in my opinion, Linus Torvalds is not a major driver of the Linux kernel development since decades. And I would actually not want to do his job, although he's certainly well paid with $1 million of salary and compensations. But I would find his job too boring of just merging and reviewing patches. Although maybe for $1 million in salary and compensation, one could deal with that. But yeah, all he mostly does is reviewing others' patches and very rarely develop new stuff, right? So yes, he acts basically acting like a huge filter of filtering random garbage and shouting at people if they send in too broken stuff. But basically everyone like Greg Crow-Hartman or David S. Miller or any other well-trained, educated kernel developer could do that. So I don't think there is any risk of Linux kernel. Certainly in that event, there will be more corporate interests taking over between IBM, Red Hat, Microsoft or Google, but that is certainly something to be seen for the future. But anyway, basically this also shows we need, that is really the last word now, as long as usual when we engage in the community and keep talking. But that is why choice is important and not relying on a monoculture, very, not only in the forest of trees for pests and wildfires, but also like not everyone using Linux, right? Like similar to not everyone using Windows, because if you run your business with Windows and there's a security vulnerability, then everything is hacked and taken over. So similar, no operating system should have 100% or 90 or yet let alone even 80% market share. But why it's important to have different implementations to test and harden interoperability and like not run everything on Linux, because if there's a bug, then your firewall, your router, your file server, your distributed storage and virtualization, everything is affected, and why it's actually beneficial to have some machines on OpenBSD and some on T2 Linux, and best not to run Windows and Microsoft. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something. Here in read, copy, update, tree algorithms, use after free, and stuff you could read up. If you're interested in this stuff, these are this kind of reports to read and follow and study the code. I hope you learned something. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe, and have a good day or night. And I hope to see you soon for all the next vulnerabilities and code work to come.